Hi, I'm here with Ben Devere, who, as you probably know, is the son of Joe Dever and has taken over the mantle of the Lone Wolf and possibly the Grey Star um, books and series and world. Welcome to International Game Book Day,
Thank you for having
and
me.
our pleasure, our pleasure. Now, I've got a load of questions. I like to start from kind of the beginning of how you got into it. Obviously, slightly unusual circumstances for yourself,
Yeah.
and but tell me about when you were a child, kind of growing up in a house full of game books and role playing. Were
Yeah, my
you?
dad was always like we would play with his models because he was a big model maker, painter, collector, as people probably know. And so his tabletop gaming uh, events in the upstairs of our house were quite famous things. And so there was, all kinds of characters passing through, and I would be under the table with the collection of the characters that had been killed, kind of creating my own little parades and whatnot when I was about 3 or 4. I think that's my earliest memory. Um, I was never a Lone Wolf fan. I did read them, but it never hooked me in. I was never really a gamer. And it was always very separate to his family life. So it was never really
Hmm.
my thing. My experience with my dad was much more personal. And the work stuff was just work stuff. So we never really talked about it. But he always had in his head that I would take over, although he never told me that until right at the last. So that was a bit of a shock. But then I suppose I should have seen it coming. Um,
What do you think he saw in you that made him feel that you could take on the mantle?
I have no idea. I mean, it was. Um, I've always written, and we used to write things together. So I used to be very much into film and theatre, and we would write scripts that we would then perform with our amateur dramatics company and in school and whatnot. Um, and I did a degree in script writing for film and television. So I think I guess he thought that I could pull together a book using his notes. There wasn't much creating to be done because his notes were
Right.
quite thorough. And also, I've had a lot of help, obviously, with Vincent. By a lot, I mean like he's done the
Yeah.
majority of work. Really, I've just kind of edited it, I suppose. So
Well,
yeah,
it sounds like you had a very sort of a visual narrative brain, which you got from your father.
yeah. I mean, like we were
Um,
we shared a love of history and fantasy and adventure stories. We used to geek out on things like Lord of the Rings and Indiana Jones, and I think we even created our own version of Indiana Jones, which we filmed and performed at Christmas once to the rest of the family, which they was probably the most boring thing. They still take the mickey out of me for it because I had to sit through an hour of
do
Indiana Jones.
you
But
still have it?
it's probably on VHS somewhere that's going to come out, an inopportune moment just to embarrass me. But um, yeah, I've already forgotten what your question was. Sorry.
Just why your father chose you to kind of carry on
I
the
mean, I
world.
guess just because I was his son, I guess it was a nice thing for him
Hmm.
to hand over. I mean, it's funny because now I've gotten to know all of his collaborators and all of the amazing team that have worked with him. I can kind of understand why having someone who's a little bit separate to the fandom, kind of overseeing things, makes a lot of sense, and for it to be a family member as well, because there's obviously the nice legacy aspect of it, which any father would like. But also, it's been actually been really useful for me to have a kind of almost subjective opinion on things when it comes to editing the books and making decisions. Because I'd like to think I have quite a good sense of what works and what doesn't in terms of story, and I can tell when we're being kind of too fanboy or we're just serving a very niche audience, and when it's actually genuinely good. At least I like to think I am. So maybe that had something to do with it. But to be honest, I think it's what he wanted to do, so he did it.
So what was your process? I mean, you've written, how many have you actually written just from his notes from yourself, and how
Two,
many?
two,
Uh,
Dead in the Deep and The
uh,
Dusk of the Final Night, 30 and 31.
so what was your process to get to that point? Did you just go his notes, or did you read all the books beforehand and sort of
I
get
mean,
into the world, or
I did read them all, but I didn't play them all like I cheated essentially. I just tried to get as much of
mm,
the story in as I could. So I was reading and rereading the story so far sections at the front of the book, which were really helpful. And then Vincent and others had they kind of compiled timelines and you know bits of lore and history, and I read bits of source books and stuff. And really, it was just kind of almost a process of like years really of osmosis, just slowly
mm,
soaking it up. At first it was incredibly intimidating, the amount of work. I just thought I'm never gonna understand who the elder magi are. I'm never gonna understand like the Chianti and all of this. Like it's just crazy words just flying over your head when you
yeah.
start. But then slowly you begin to piece it together, and then even more slowly you start to think, well, maybe I can actually have an opinion here. Which is
So
so
when you released your first book, oh, I can imagine that was quite a nerve-wracking time. Can you just talk me through how that happened, and how you felt, and how it was received, and
yeah, it's terrifying. Um, First, I'd like to explain that I'm in a campsite on holiday and I don't live in the back of my car. So now that's out of the way. Yeah, I mean, I think it was more nerve-wracking for Vincent because he knew so many of the fans, and he obviously being a massive Lone Wolf fan, it's his dream come true, but also his worst nightmare because this is the first time anybody apart from my dad had written an official kind of canon Lone Wolf book. He wasn't
mm,
around to consult. What were people going to think? You tend to expect the worst, especially with fantasy fans. A lot of the time, they can be quite toxic. These fans,
mm,
look what happened with Star Wars, and um, we've just been like the reaction was really incredible. But they were, I mean, they loved the book, which was amazing, but they
mm,
were just so I don't want to say forgiving because it's almost like it's putting us down, but they were just so kind of up for whatever we had done. They were just like, look, the fact that you've put in the effort and you've actually tried your best is really all we could have asked for, is what a lot of people said. The fact it was a good book is almost a kind of convenient after byproduct. I'm
did
really
you
proud of
feel that
it. I genuinely think it's
you
good.
were did you feel like you were writing in your father's voice? Did you kind of hear him
You know
as
what?
you're writing? And
What's mad is that, like, at first, because it was so daunting, I did try and cheat, and I drafted in some, ghost writers, and thought, well, if I can just get them to do all the heavy lifting, and then maybe I could just
mm,
tweak a few bits here and there, and then if I have to have my name on it, then so be it. But I'm not going to pretend like I can do this. But after going through two or three people and having to then rewrite their work to get it back to my dad's tone, it was actually Vincent that said, look, I think actually weirdly you are just naturally the best suited to this because you just know your dad's tone of voice implicitly.
mm.
um, and I was reluctant to agree with him, but turns out I think he might have been right. And that's not through any kind of skill or anything. It just is just the way it is. And he did have a very kind of he had a very downplayed, simple, no frills kind of Hemingway-esque type of writing, which was both of our kind of favorite type of writing. We used to
Mm.
read a lot of the same books. We're both big George Orwell fans. I remember I did a précis of his Why I Write essay that me and my dad geeked out on for weeks, which is essentially kind of a treatise for simple English. So that was really the task for me, was to just kind of get everything down in as few words as possible and just keep driving the story forwards, which I really enjoy doing. I enjoy doing it more than I do creative writing, of actually inventing the stories and the events, which my dad and Vincent are kind of taking care of. So it's actually turned out
Yeah.
that the jobs we've had to do are very well suited to us, I think.
So how many more of the Lone Wolf books do you plan to do? And are you excited, or you kind of think, oh, I actually want to take it a little bit further now? I'm getting the hang of it and
There's one
enjoying it
more
more.
to finish. It's the final book, Light of
Mm,
the Kai, which will be out in, hopefully, fingers crossed, in time for the 40th anniversary in June 2024. We've just finished plotting the first half of that, and we're just about to get stuck into the second half. And then we'll start writing in earnest probably in January. So then we've got a year to get it out. And then 6
Did your
months.
father leave many notes for the end? Did he kind of
Yeah, he
explain?
did. I mean, less and less as you got more towards the end. But I do remember it was a really quite an intense day actually, because he was kind of at the end of his tether at that point, trying to figure out how this. Yeah, you're wrapping up a 40-year story. I mean, it's quite complicated. So trying to get everything out of his head in the right order and trying to figure out exactly what he meant and make sure we were true to his vision. It was tricky. It's hard work, but I think it's great. I think people are gonna. One
That's
person
good.
so far has guessed the ending on one of the fan forums, because there are so many theories. And one
Ooh.
person has accidentally stumbled across it, but no one picked up on it. Me and Vincent were like, "Oh no!" But luckily, it's only one. I think it was almost by accident. It's such a great twist. I'm really excited about writing it. But yeah, no pressure. It's
Fantastic.
only the last book of a 40-year story.
That's great. And I do have some questions which may follow on to what you're saying. I won't. I don't think there's any plot spoilers in here. But we have. Yeah. Okay. Will there be any sort of comics or animations
Well,
in the? And I hear there were TV shows and films and various different things that we were dabbling in. Has anything sort of come
yeah.
to fruition?
So we had a shopping agreement with a production company, which basically meant they had the rights to then go out and try and find funding for a TV show, which doesn't really mean anything because it's not even an option. It's just an option to look for an option. And this is probably the third or fourth time that something like that's happened. My dad said to me once, it's kind of hopefully it's a question of when, not if, but you do get the feeling that these IPs are kind of passed around from studio to studio as kind of bargaining chips, and that for these things to actually happen takes a huge amount of momentum and luck. So if and when it does happen, it would. I don't want it to happen, and I don't expect it to happen until the books are all out in good order, back in the shops, in paperback, in ebook, and there's a mobile app and a board game and all the rest of it, which is all on the way. It's going to be kind of the next 5 years to get the whole franchise back into some kind of shape where people recognize the name again. That's the point at which
So,
things like
so you are looking to republish all the books again
yeah.
and have
So the
them.
definitive series, the definitive edition project started this year. So we've done books 1 to 5. They come out in paperback this winter, and they're coming out in the States again, which is huge because that was where most of the fans were originally. And the plan is to go through all 32 books over the next 3 years. And we've got a few other things on the way as well, which are quite exciting.
Is that just the UK and America, or is that worldwide?
It's
I know there's
worldwide.
there's
Yeah,
a huge
yeah,
amount of brilliant.
yeah.
And how will people get them? Will it be through who's the publisher?
Wherever. I mean, like, I think there's 12 different publishers around the world now, but in English, it's all through Home Guard Press. Which,
Brilliant.
yeah, when I first took over, I was talking to a lot of publishers, and everybody said the same thing, which is we really love it. We'd love to publish the first 3 or the first 5, and then we'll see how we go. And that's kind of how it got into ill repair in the past. And the fans and me were gonna want consistency throughout. You want to guarantee that all the books are in print and that they remain in print. And really, only in the last 5 years has it been possible for someone like me with no prior experience to actually set up a publishing company and make a kind of ham-fisted yet good enough job of it, whereby the biggest printing house in the country now has a special kind of indie branch, which I assume they must be running at a loss because I don't know how they can be so competitive. But regardless, it's all quite, yeah, it's all changed. It's actually more for a lot of new writers, especially now. It's much more appealing to be self-published. Self-publishing is like it had a kind of negative air to it, whereas now it's actually preferred by most people, I think.
Yes, including myself.
Yeah.
Now we've got quite a few people who are asking about Grey Star and the future of that series.
Yeah, so I've been talking to Ian Page, and I'd love to get them out again in the same definitive edition format. And there are plans for more, but that's kind of all up to Ian, really. So it's kind of in his hands. But we are in touch.
Fantastic. Will you be writing that as well, or?
Me? No, no, no. I mean,
Yeah.
I imagine we collaborate a little bit, but I mean, me and Vincent have been talking about a prequel series. Once the main series winds down, we'll see if we still feel as passionate about it in a year or two, but we've got some ideas. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I've got Matt Sheriff, who's got a lot of questions here. Let me just run through them. Firstly, I think we might have answered that one with the conclusion of the Lone Wolf series. Are there any plans for a festival, like the Fighting Fantasy Festival?
No.
And
I
since you have a slight connection with festivals, are you going to market in
I've
any
spent the
way?
last 20 years working in festivals, and now that I'm
Mm.
out of festivals, I suddenly want nothing to do with them ever again. I never want to produce or direct or program another event as long as I live. Happy
Fair enough. Well,
retired.
we have to cut.
Yeah.
Are you actually going? I saw you at the UK Games Expo. Are you going around to any
Yeah.
other sort of expos and things this year or
Yeah,
next year?
I'm happy to. I'm more than happy to attend. But I mean, if other people, if Lone Wolf blows up, which there's might happen, but it will never be as big as Fighting Fantasy, and that's quite a small event anyway. I mean, they're actually allowing us to be there next month. No, this month, in a couple of weeks, in fact, which is wonderful. So
Fantastic.
we'll have a stall, and the books will be on sale. I can't imagine there's enough demand for a Lone Wolf festival. I mean, a few hundred people might come. We'll see. Give it a few years.
Yeah.
If you tell all of your
Yeah.
friends to
Okay.
buy the books and it gets huge again, then maybe
That's
it'll
it.
happen.
I think the thing is, it's just trying to get in the hands of the future generations.
I
Not
think,
just the people who've been buying
These
them, but the people
these
who.
fairs are really the way to do it. You can have, like at Luca, we've had Lone Wolf events at Luca. So at the UK Games Expo, we might have a kind of Lone Wolf area at some point, and we might put on an event in one of the conference rooms or something, like a playthrough or a read through or something. Something like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. He's got a few more questions. He's talking about the maps that Francisco was doing, whether
Mm.
they'll be released in one volume.
We've been toying with the idea of doing a proper atlas, like a big coffee table book, beautifully produced with all his best work, and then we've got loads of he's got loads of ideas for loads of extra bits and bobs to chuck in there. I think his work definitely deserves it. It's incredible, and it's also so well, it's just all over the place, isn't it? And different products, different places. It would be great to. I think it deserves to be compiled for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just saying about a compendial sort of coffee table book. So that sounds like exactly that kind of thing. But
Exactly that.
talking about the entire history of Lone Wolf as well, and the conception, and
Yeah, I mean
I
that's
suppose
not a
all
bad
kind of.
shout. The Magnum and Companion was kind of that back in the 80s, and that's something with like a new Magnum and Companion. The new Magnum and Companion would be a kind of companion piece to the Atlas, which would be a kind of a very visual, illustrated guide through Magnum and
Fantastic.
which would be a little bit like the appendices at the back of the definitive editions, but glossy and coloured and beautiful. So that's another thing we'd like to do. I wanted all of these things really to have either come out or be way along the process by the big 40th anniversary year,
Definitely.
2024, is really when a lot of things will be happening.
When
So
I spoke to your father a few years ago, and he just released the role playing game.
right.
I think it just come out that week, and I think it went in, and it has it had a second edition. And are you talking about a third edition at the moment with?
LWAG, the
the com-
Cubicle 7. Yeah, I mean, there was, I think, is it 9 source books? I think there's two that are missing that were never delivered or something. I
Yeah,
lose track. But we've been talking about what to do with the RPG because the rights have fallen back into our hands. We're concentrating on a different thing at the moment, which we'll announce in good time. But then, because all the source books and the RPG rules and everything are, all we need to do really is package it up and print it. So that's another thing we'd like to have out on the 40th is a kind of reworked, tweaked, kind of beautified version of LWAG to come back out in time for the 40th. But I need to talk to Cubicle 7 about it and just get all of the rights and everything wrapped up. And it's all a bit kind of messy at the minute. So we'll see. But
yeah.
first things first.
You've got a lot on your plate, Ben, haven't you? Till the 40th. How do you find the time? Are you obviously on holiday at the moment? But is this your full time thing now? Or just
No,
or
I've been doing it on the side. Like I said, my career was in events. I ran a couple of big
mm,
music festivals in the UK, until the pandemic made short work of them. And then last year I did it. I did it, and then it just didn't really have the same shine to it. It felt like I kind of moved on in
mm,
my head because I'd been busy with Lone Wolf, and it just felt like the right time to jump in and take it more seriously with all of these projects going on. It stopped being a side hustle long ago, and I should take it a bit more seriously, which I am doing. So now I've retired from that and I've sold up my other event brand, and I'm now just full time on this. So from September after this holiday, it's kind of pedal to the metal. We've got like a new website coming. We've got a podcast coming. Got another like 6 books to publish in the next few months. Then the paperbacks are obviously a huge
wow,
thing. US distribution is no joke. It's quite big task to try and convince people to sell your stuff. And uh, you know, production lines at the minute are all a bit messed up. Costs have gone up. It's fiddly.
yeah,
It's fiddly. It's business stuff. It's not really my
yeah,
bag,
no,
but
no.
I'm my best.
Well, it seems like you're putting your hand to everything, and you're doing a fantastic job, Ben. I
Thanks, mate.
think your dad would be justly proud,
Oh,
and I think that the fandom are really kind of proud of you as well, and I think they're very excited about what you're doing with Lone Wolf. So
yeah. Well, I hope everybody appreciates the, you know, you'll see over the next 2 years, I think it will all kind of start to make sense. It's all been very patchy for obvious reasons the last few years, but we are finding our stride now. And yeah, hopefully it will start to look more and more like a fully fledged kind of professional game slash publishing slash design studio. We'll see.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great, Ben. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your holiday. And hopefully we'll see you at the Fighting Fancy Fest, and in fact, well,
Essentially.
and probably all the other events you're going to as well. I'm sure we'll all bump into each other.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
mate.
much.
All right.
Cheers.